Cynocephali, or dog-headed. Guardians. They exist in almost every religion. They have survived even in monotheistic religions. Guardians of souls in the form of animals. Cynocephala are not mentioned in Latin Christianity and similar ones. This happened when religion made man a god on earth, which resulted from the incorrect translation of one, but quite important fragment, which made life miserable for animals. In the original, a word was used that means to manage, not to rule. To manage is not to rule. God never gave power to people. Just as no one deprived Lucifer of the role of the angel of justice. The situation is completely different in Eastern Christianity. Cynocephala are often encountered there, and icons with images of dogs are nothing unusual. Christians of the Western Rite do not even know that St. Rocco is the patron saint of dogs. Everyone goes to the poor Francis. This is mainly because religious education is at a low level. People really don't know what they believe in, and those who deny religion have absolutely no idea what they are denying. As a result, when you read forums, you don't know which side is more ridiculous in its theses. Both sides are genuinely making fools of themselves with their ignorance. There are sacred animal beings in all religions. For Muslims, it is definitely a lion. A white lion. Allah descends to earth in the form of a lion, not a man. Islam has corrected the error in translation. There is an episode about the approach of the branches of orthodoxy to the divine nature of Jesus. We also discussed how this division came about in the episode about Theodora. It is really complicated in our world. We refer you there. Interestingly, Judaism is also favorable to lions, although over time they began to consider themselves a better race too much. A good Muslim ruler must also be like a lion, and that's why many Muslim rulers have lions in home. Well, it will be always difficult subject. Those who I knew gave these lions better life than in zoos over the world. Brutally true that Timbavati lions are exterminated in poaching, and now Gov want to do it legal. White lions were first, and seriously there's no longer place for them. White in meaning species, not leucism, albino. Contrary to appearances, this is pressure that not everyone can withstand. He simply could not withstand it. He would have been a good ruler. He was loved, but he thought that it was different. I think it is time to tell the world directly that the leaders of Iran have a problem with perceiving the world. It is hard to find a passage in the Quran about not having animals. Attaching this to Western culture is ridiculous in their case, especially since a moment later they refer to being the oldest civilization, which they are. The processes of domestication of animals took place in Mesopotamia, Iran and Egypt first. Persian kings and shahs also kept not only dogs in their homes, but also tigers, panthers, lions and falcons. We know perfectly well how the last shah died before the Turkish conquest. He released a falcon. He was Shiite. Falcons are the height of European nonchalance. After all, the nobility had them. They still do. I also have one by accident. The poor guy has chicks on his windowsill because he has no other options. But somehow that falcon is still needed, as well before a plane takes off. In Iran, as well. Still, it's the best method to protect engines. If they want to continue to fight Zoroastrianism with this method, they will probably not win, but for sure will make a fool of themselves. The world would do well to stop fueling their tourism. It is sad what has been done to this empire. First the Pahlavi milked it to the bottom, and now it is occupied by lurked fanatics who are no descendant of Tengri. We have different mothers, but within the same civilization. Although Tatars are related to Turks, they are culturally connected to both Mongols and Turks. However, we do not want to be called Ukrainians, Poles, Belarusians, Lithuanians or Russians. We do not have our own country, but we are not one of them. In Russia, citizenship and nationality are generally still marked. It is a country of many nations. Sometimes this origin closes doors due to history, and sometimes it opens. Tatars and Mongols were the only ones who had this path closed for a very long time. Exactly. We are not very popular. Due active participation in the White Uprising. Exile to Syberia, and so we find out that after some people decided to stay there, the most famous search engine claims that we have been there forever. Nope, we were always in Crimea, and then we recognized the authority of Batu and began to divide and wander. Some of us went to Kazakhstan, but what about Syberia and Uzbekistan? That's more complicated. The Tatars took an active part in the White Uprising in defense of the Tsar. Nicholas was very friendly towards us and most of the Tsar's guard were Tatars. It was not at all like it is described in history textbooks in various corners of the world, that everyone was happy for the Bolsheviks. Similarly, not everyone was happy about the French Revolution, which really did not bring anyone any legacy. More about that in another episode. The uprising seemed very promising, but suddenly the neighbors and also the UK began to change sides. My grandfather always claimed that the animosity between Nicholas and George was so great that the latter went so far in the sick rivalry between them, fueled by a stupid grandmother, that he put his own animosity before the fate of people. Lenin suggested that Nicholas could go to the UK, but George refused. Unfortunately, there are documents. We don't really know what happened in Wypatiev's house. This is the most interesting criminal case of the 20th century that has never been solved. In the 21st, it's Soraya Pavali and her brother. Unfortunately, everyone is silent about her as if under a spell. She just left when she announced that she had some documents. We don't know what happened in Wypatiev's house, because the places where the bodies were found don't match the report at all. There's also a problem with the whole shooting in the basement, because the bodies of Maria and Alexei were found much further away. They were holding hands. Everything indicated that they were running away. They weren't in the basement. The Whites believed for a long time that Maria and Alexei had survived because of this. There was never any talk about Anastasia. This is Hollywood, and indeed, shortly after the war, a woman appeared who pretended to be her, but it turned out to be a fraud. We don't know whose order it was, because it wasn't Lenin's, and if it was his, he paid. Stalin nicely eliminated him and his wife as well. Officially not his, because he refused and denied that it was his decision. Someone had to step out of line. From the new documents that were given, it must be said that although this German spy destroyed the country, he did a lot to save his family. However, the uprising had to be paid for. Djugashvili in particular had a certain conviction that everyone wanted to eliminate him. Of course, his descendants are still in the Duma, although they shouldn't be, but before we start throwing mud. The Mengele family was not supposed to deal with genetics, but they are, and Hess was not supposed to be in parliament, but they are. He preferred to eliminate in the bud. Let's not forget that he sentenced his own son to death, sent his daughter to Syberia, his son-in-law. His wife finally committed suicide in front of him after she found out what had happened to the people living in the areas where the uprising was born. He did. We are talking about the Holodomor. Something that Europe did not see, because it wanted Stalin to join the war. The Holodomor is most often talked about in matters of Ukraine. Not entirely true. The Holodomor also affected part of today's Russia and Belarus. There are the best lands in Europe, which will always produce. These are alluvial soils. And despite this, it was brought to the point that people there ate their own children and human corpses. The Bolsheviks had suppressed the uprisings quite bloodily much earlier. They had a principle that usurp entire villages, and we leave one corps without legs and arms to show and speak that they were here. Stalin decided to protect himself just in case. The entire grain production from these lands went to Moscow. There was no food for the local people. In Moscow, it was often dumped, or people lived beyond their means, especially when foreigners came in hotels. Here you did not hunt, you did not survive. Wolves did not even want to eat these dry corpses. The Holodomor issue was best presented in the film by Gareth Jones. He was a man who had reached these areas and described them after returning to Great Britain. They made a fool of him, until he died in mysterious circumstances. It had already been established. Stalin would be needed. The Holodomor killed more people than the Germans. In 1944, the pretext was that the Tatars supported the Germans. It was not true. The Russians did not do it either. The only successful significant, although controversial, Jewish partisan group, Tevi Bielski, existed thanks to the Soviets. The Tsar was not an anti-Semite either. The Ukrainians supported them, and quite brutally. The Ukrainians were the nation. Not the Poles living in Ukraine, the Hutsuls, but ethnically pure Ukrainians, if you can call them ethnically pure. The Cossacks were refugees from various countries. Generally, a characteristic feature of this people is the constant statement lately that as soon as you deny something that they propagate, you are already an anti-Semite. On the other hand, they can deny everything. This was also one of the reasons why Tevi left Israel. He did not like this creation. It was a brutal case. He was a neighbor. It was stupid to supply weapons to the partisans, but my grandfather believed that this was the right thing to do. He paid for it with one child. By deporting his entire family to Kazakhstan and Syberia, and he was saved by a visa from Kaunas. They were all resettled to Syberia and Uzbekistan. Only in 1989 were they allowed to return. This is how something was born that the map of a well-known search engine considers to have always been there. We had not been there forever, but many did not want to return. And what to return to anyway? We had been in Crimea forever, but before the advent of Batu we were known more as Pechenegs or Cumans. They themselves called themselves Cumans. For centuries we were probably the only Turkmen nation that did not migrate from Asia, but wandered from Europe. Huns. We may certainly have something in common, but the Huns have more in common, strangely, with the Finns. The Huns are sometimes considered a Mongolian or Turkmen nation. Hyungnu was used by the Chinese to describe the barbarian peoples beyond the wall. The etymology of the word Atal refers, depending on the country, either to the Volga or simply means old, in the Turkish meaning of the word, which is also supposed to describe an experienced person with a position. We cannot really assign them any further. There is a theory that we came into being thanks to the Huns, who were assimilated with the peoples inhabiting these lands. Today, no one considers the Slavs to be a separate group, but a group that was created as a result of the migration of peoples from the Goths, Scythians, Huns, Vandals and a few lesser known, who settled in these lands, stayed, assimilated quickly and created new, pseudo-nations, through marriages and coexistence. In this era, we do not talk about nations in the sense of today's meaning of this concept. The fact is that the Huns worshipped the storm. And we, too, like the Mongols, but in combination with the wolf. Many of us have European facial features, but that doesn't mean that Asian ones don't happen. They can always come back. My father was already Europeanized, although he aged faster like all Turkmen nations, but his grandfather was a typical Asian. Because few people applied for documents and saw a photo of our grandfather. My father and I applied when we tried to restore citizenship. Unfortunately, my father died just before. In our case, it was a difficult procedure because my grandfather had war experiences, my great-grandfather was a white insurgent and the lands were divided between 4 countries, and since citizenship was granted based on the address of residence, these documents had to be collected from all countries to be presented in one. We are certainly one of the most interesting nations in Europe, right after the Basques. It is not known where they come from, and they are distinguished by a rare blood type which belong just to them. We are an Asian people, officially Turkmen, but once you could read Mongolian, even earlier it was claimed that we were related to the Huns. Our migration did not begin from Asia, but to Asia. Genetic shows something different. In the ancient religion before Islam or Orthodox Christianity, we were definitely closer to the shamanism of the Mongols. Yes, so his father was a worshipper of Tengri and his mother was a worshipper of Bozkurt, but it's the same thing. A better combination, although since he's a bastard, he didn't gain much in our family system. We are children of the wolf and we'll talk about wolves, dogs, cats and Christmas. When I see this Saxon diva, I always want to resurrect Stalin and ask that this order be extended to practice kicking German butts. I don't agree with Stalin on many issues, but in this case I do. They are like machines. The biggest moron can be at the forefront, and they'll follow him. Well, a wolf attacked a pony in an unfenced field by the forest and now it's time to start hunting wolves. However, the lady whose patron saint never existed by name, and whose name means nothing more than a she-bear, let's not insult a bear, forgot what stupid laws she had introduced in this area earlier and took advantage of them herself. I think all those who analyze what a cucumber is have forgotten what law they introduced. The proof that Tatars descend from Huns is supposed to be a certain thing they do after the death of someone close or someone they respected. The Huns did the same. Perhaps the entire steppe used to do it. Today it is rarer, but still common. We do not commit suicide then. Besides, to commit suicide by cutting your veins, you have to make a different cut, but it is our funeral ritual that has been perpetuated in films as suicide. Unfortunately, there will be no suicide this way. We cut a vein to draw some blood, but above all to leave a scar, deep enough to last for the rest of your life. Blood has always been important in the steppe culture. Through blood, you return to the earth. These scars are there to remember someone. This tradition has remained in my family. I will remind you of a very old interview with a sheep farmer from Turkey and his statement after he was presented with how European breeding law and regulations regarding damage caused by wild animals work. He replied, "I would be ashamed that I did not protect the herd. It is my duty to protect the herd. If a wolf approached the herd, what kind of shepherd am I?" There is no such shame in Europe, and more often you can read funny comments about wolves snatching children from strollers. Generally, no one leaves children alone in strollers, if only because of cot death, and thanks these fairy tales many journalists exist. Terrible news, which is not so scary for psychiatrists and criminologists. The system of society imposed chains on us, but first of all, such a thing as maternal instinct in the emotional sense has never existed. People have confused species survival. They have this need too. It is not written in the genetic code that a parent should love their offspring. Among animals, representatives of species considered the best mothers in nature are also able to reject their young. It seems to me that a lot of the blame here lies with the extremely distorted Marian cult, which over the centuries has also imposed that mothers worship children, from which these myths about maternal instinct were born. More and more scientists are talking about it, but it will take years before it reaches common sense. Invented in the Middle Ages to scare people. As you can see, there are those who take them for truth. Wolves have not attacked people since the dawn of time, unless they felt threatened, and even more so calling things by their names. A shit-covered infant is not tasty to them. The wolf was used to explain the kidnapping of children by twisted, infertile lunatics, or fathers who were fed up with another mouth to feed. In fact, we observe this today as well. Many journalists exist thanks that. These were and are real werewolf. Quite the opposite, there were situations when wolves raised people. Which is more risky for a wolf than a human, because you can't count on human gratitude. One such person who is still alive is Mr. Pantoya. Russians are not allowed to be mentioned now. The fact is that he was born in Ukraine, but he has Russian citizenship. This perestroika. Suddenly the diva of politics, who blew her nose so hard and burst into tears, that in Europe matters are discussed and resolved peacefully, stopped being peacefully disposed. How many tears were shed, and the money was certainly collected. Well, to protect wolves, the European Union came up with a great program with compensation for losses in breeding. We are talking about huge amounts of money here. This applies not only to wolves, but also to wild boars and deer, but the most is paid for the damage caused by wolves. The effects of this cunning did not take long to appear, and from what can be seen in the photos, this diva of European politics also knows perfectly well that the fence should be of the worst possible quality, and it is best if there is none. In the Middle Ages, bonfires were lit at night against wolves, because game does not approach light at night, so now everyone puts them out. Searching for a shepherd can be disappointed. A huge compensation is paid for a farm animal killed by a wolf. Often it is worth more than a sheep killed. People have no shame, that is the truth. In houses located near forests, gates are open with an invitation, as are holes in barns, fences, just so that wolf, that fox can enter. Has anyone wondered why corn is planted in a field near the forest, even if the soil is poor? Wild boars like corn. They have really taken a liking to it. Corn is the future of Europe with climate change. Whether someone likes it or not. They will come in, destroy it, there is compensation. Why does someone plant a forest nursery and not fence it in? Deer will come in, wear out their antlers, and there is compensation. Some have made money out of it. There are few who planted a forest for everyone and expect that some of the trees will go to waste. There are also few who want it for themselves, so they will fence the forest. Of course, this is not a problem because in state forests, special metal trunk covers are installed on trees in the area where deer live. The problem disappears. The tree grows. However, then there is no compensation. So we have a hood, people who are afraid to go out even in the city, but sex without a condom and drivers from a well-known non-taxi network are not afraid. We also have geniuses who claim that since the wolf is apex predator, then you have to shoot them, because there is no enemy. That's what the Chinese said. I encourage you to read the book Wolf Totem to discover what came of it. Nothing good. If someone reads with understanding, then I assume that they will not be people from the borderlands of the European Union, and even less from the Holy Empire, where secondary illiteracy has appeared. In fact, it would be enough to ask the Scots and the Irish, who were begging for the return of the wolf, the lynx, because they killed them in the 13th century, and unfortunately they will not migrate to the islands by swimming. The disappearance of predators has led to the fact that we can see deer even in Edinburgh, which is not an ugly sight, but the Scottish Highlands used to be covered in forest. This forest is gone, because they destroyed and continue to destroy the deer. Ireland has the same problem. Wolves appear in housing estates. No, the housing estates appeared in the wolf's territory and there was probably some purpose to it, although in Eastern Europe, regardless of whether we are talking about EU countries or not, developer corruption is huge. This applies to the entire globe. Developers exceed all norms, and since it is often political lobbying, there is little that can be done to them. When buying a flat, a person must reckon with the fact that they will hear their neighbor sneezing or peeing, because there are partition walls between the flats, instead of load-bearing walls, although there should be the latter. Gilded people move to the countryside for the view from the windows, and then they file a lawsuit about the smell from the barn or because the dog barked. The same thing happened to wolves. Gilded people buy a house by the forest, but they fit better into the gallery and are terrified to see a wolf. I don't know why gilded people are surprised when going to the Carpathians that wolves hang around villages there. They have been hanging around for centuries, people have lived with it. The fact that the hotel for the gilded people was built thanks to a bribe in the middle of the forest and thus a man entered the territory of a wolf that has nowhere to go is not the fault of the wolf, but of the man. I am also not sure whether the gilded people distinguish a wolf from, for example, a Czechoslovakian wolfdog. The name is misleading, but the SS in the program of recreating the wolf created several breeds, from a cross between a wolf and a domestic dog. These breeds exist to this day, they are bred in the same way, or in association with each other. Only a wolf expert can really distinguish this dog from a wolf by the shape of its face. The wolf Romeo did no harm to people, but two lunatics were found who took advantage of his naivety and killed him, because he was melanistic. Valuable fur. And so the favorite of the town disappeared. The people of the steppe respect wolves, that will not change. It is our spirit. Wolves define the steppe. You can learn a lot from wolves. I admit that I like working with wolves. You can communicate with wolves like with dogs. You just have to start seeing, not just looking. Wolves can smile, they can play. I have never met a wolf that didn't know why I was there. Some were not interested in working with the camera like dogs. It didn't matter whether we were talking about the zoo or the natural environment. They would leave. Especially in zoos, and breeders don't like it. I have stopped working with the latter completely. If the animal doesn't want to, I don't force them. There were also wolves that were able to bring their children to my photos. You could see pride in their eyes and facial expressions. They were no different from people in this. There were sad wolves. I remember two in particular. One was wounded. In the zoo, brothers fought for everything. Two males shouldn't be together. The other. It was a story of human indolence. He had no ear and part of his paw. Some gilded man. Not in my environment, they are called gilded people, they will never be. Nobility. A gilded man bought a wolf puppy. Supposedly from some private zoo, but the papers were so bad, it was more likely a puppy stolen from the forest. He kept it at home. The wolf grew up. He didn't raise it. He thought it would be like a dog. It won't be like a dog at home with a wolf. We domesticate dogs for much longer. We pass on certain behaviors to them during the breeding process. The wolf, just like thousands of years ago, has to be programmed for this breeding process. The animal became problematic. The guy wasn't Austrian, but he moved there and, as it turns out, threw the wolf in a dog shelter. At first, the wolf met some stupid people in the shelter who thought he was a dog. The wolf didn't fit in at the shelter. He fought with dogs. He fought with people. Finally, a new employee came in and took care of it, but the animal was irreversibly damaged both physically and mentally. He ended up in a wild animal shelter where he will die. Extreme indolence of people at all levels of this animal's life. Something that connects us with Native Americans. In the past, the Mongols, Kipchaks, and Tatars reduced the population of wolves by finding their lairs and killing the weaker pups. This system worked, and then when the communist government came, the Mongols in China had to protect wolves in yurts and icehouses. Few individuals survived. There were huge penalties for protecting a wolf, but the Mongols did not give up and eventually won, when the magnificent, most brilliant party discovered that they did not want wild boars either, and there was no one to do so. It was strange, because the guardian of heaven for the Chinese is also the wolf. That is why the author of the book Wolf Totem, although he only described the culture, detailed description of hunting and landscapes of Inner Mongolia, which no one in the party looked upon favorably, because after all, the Mongols created the powerful Yuan dynasty, went to prison. And not only for that. The main reason was that the book sold better than the one by Mao, because people simply wanted to read something different. Suddenly, a second book appeared on the market. A book that had absolutely no connection with politics. Described the life of one of the nations inhabiting the state of China. A really safe book. People simply wanted to read something other than political brainwashing. It turned out to be dangerous for the author. Wolves kill sick individuals. Unlike the political diva, they have the Jacobson organ, so it might be worth doing an autopsy on a pony. I've met a wolf in the forest many times and somehow it didn't attack me. This one is definitely tengri. Good question? The wolf is a cynocephalus, but why do people hate it? One scientist even ventured to say that, first of all, the wolf family is more harmonious than the human family, and that arouses jealousy. Man domesticated the wolf, taught it to follow him. Probably in a similar way to what it does now with a hole in the fence. Back then, it used leftover food by the cave, today it's an open garbage can. A ready-made restaurant for everyone. Without the wolf's help, man would still be sitting in the cave. The wolf, and then the dog born of it, the horse, and later the cat created human civilization, whether people like it or not, and for that alone, they deserve respect. The wolf was worshipped by pagan cults all over Europe. Even in the country of the political diva, we have Fenrir. That one who will start Ragnarok and after it will come paradise, Gimea. Germanic mythology is the mythology of the Vikings. Few people remember that in ancient Greece the wolf was the image of Kronos. Finally we have the she-wolf of Romulus and Remus. It was Aristotle who first started writing nonsense about wolves hunting people while praising that they fishing with them in Crimea. Even if they caught fish, Aristotle unfortunately writes nonsense at the moment, because he was never owned Crimea. Finally we have the Lupercalia in Rome, although in honor of Attis, but they are also so deeply rooted that Latin Christianity will introduce Christmas on December 25th. An artificial creation. It will separate Epiphany, because it cannot eradicate this phenomenon from culture. Krampus is connected with that tradition. And it was Latin Christianity that harmed wolves. There is an episode about Christmas. I would like to remind you that most Orthodox Christians do not have a holiday like the Latins, although we call it that for peace of mind. We celebrate something completely different. To discredit the old myths, the wolf had to be presented in the worst possible form. Unfortunately, the figure has become established, and to this there is also the diva of the Holy Empire and her ponytail, as well as hysterics who take everything they write in a glossy newspaper and on the internet as true. But here again there is a joke. A joke related to the holidays. Saint Nicholas, the original one from Smyrna or formerly Myrna, was also the patron saint of wolves. In old images he is depicted with wolves. His cult has always been popular. Let's be honest. The poorer a person is, the more they are happy about a gift. It was impossible to remove this saint, and in today's times it is no longer possible, although he has changed fundamentally. Even atheists cannot imagine the holidays without gifts and Saint Nicholas. The Latin Church hasn't liked wolves, but their patron saint could. Saint Nicholas is also the guardian of sick animals, and these gifts are really at the end of his church biography. Honestly, this grave didn't smell like a forest to me. Smyrna is certainly worth visiting, although the body was stolen during the Crusades to Bari. It is no secret that if a farmer could, he would kill everything that lives, and he would still complain that there is no harvest. Nothing helps if there is no rainfall, the soil is bad, and those from TV look forward to another month of sunshine in an air-conditioned room like during an orgasm because they believe that food comes from a store. Judaism itself is already harmful to wolves, and this is by no means due to the fact that Torah is holy words. They fought Zoroastrianism, just like Islam. The first religion of the book, which is forgotten, but still exists, and it also worshipped wolves and dogs. By forgetting Zoroastrianism, even erasing it, but at the same time plagiarizing texts, all the contradictions between God and Lucifer were born. Monotheism was created from dualism, and as a result, one fragment contradicts another, because the authors forgot what came before. We explained this problem in the episode about the Lord of Light, when we explained why we are not entirely monotheists, because the Bible contradicts itself in these matters. It's yang and yin. It's not entirely bad or good. In Japan, they are a symbol of the Fujiwara clan. The best warriors. Just like the tiger. Fujiwara claws. To this day, all the emperor's wives are related to this clan. The wolf is a Cynocephalus. Let's hope that this artificial colossus called the Union falls apart faster, before the diva starts ruling, who is supposed to live in the forest. Especially since the diva has a huge castle. Everyone knows German stinginess, but if she loves her horse so much, she can probably afford a fence for it. Cynocephala did not survive in Catholicism, and the further we move away from the first Christian trends, the worse it gets. It is not idolatry to keep an icon of a creature with a dog's head, because it is the most powerful guardian, Saint Christopher. According to legends, or in fact an incorrect translation, he had a dog's head. In the 4th century BC, the Greek historian and physician Ctesias wrote a detailed account of Cynocephala in his work on India. Some researchers see the prototype of the creatures in figures from the pantheon of gods of ancient Egypt, who are supposed to be Hapi or Anubis, the Egyptian god of the dead depicted with the head of a jackal. Pliny in his work Naturalis Historia described them as a people living in the mountains of India. The dog-headed were supposed to communicate by barking, live in caves and dress in animal skins. They were described as good hunters, using spears, bows and swords. Street. Christopher is the patron saint of travelers and sailors in Christianity. In English, Bulgarian, Greek and Irish folk tradition he was sometimes depicted as a giant with a dog's head who carried travelers across rivers. This tradition is typically Eastern. This is how he is depicted in the Old English Passion of St. Christopher, where he is called a representative of a race with a long jaw, sharp teeth and gleaming eyes and an inhabitant of a country of cannibals. According to Irish legends, Christopher was born a dog-headed giant, a pagan named Reprobus. However, he was supposed to express remorse over his origins, and after baptism, great joy at being transformed into a human. Over time, the version about the dog's head faded. Already in the 10th century, Walter of Speyer wrote about Christopher that he came from the Cynocephala people, different in speech and appearance from other people. Over time, Christopher was only depicted as a giant. Differently, in Russia and Finland, legends spoke of Saint Christopher's exceptional beauty. Wanting to free himself from the advances of girls, Christopher asked God to disfigure him, and in response he was given the face of a dog. Another Christian saint with a dog's head was also supposed to be Street Mercurius, while Street Guinefort was a dog that the people of southern France considered a martyr. Anubis is an extraordinary Cynocephalus. My favorite god from ancient Egypt. A jackal, a close relative of the wolf. He was the reason there is no dog in the Christmas Eve stable. There had to be one, as Pope Benedict XVI wrote in his Meditations. If there were shepherds, there was also a dog, but he was removed because he was too closely associated with Anubis. I don't like live Christmas nativity scenes, especially in Eastern Europe, because they torment these animals. That's the truth. They didn't just paint that donkey. CCTV in these countries doesn't help much. Seth. Definitely Seth. It is not our fault that the Germans once allowed people to keep raccoons, kangaroos, and various creatures in their homes, but when people discovered that they could not take care of them, they threw them into the forest. There they found partners and reproduced. They have herds of rheas, emus, kangaroos, and raccoons running freely. Dewa is again showing her ignorance here, because she does not notice that the climate is changing, and as a result species from warmer regions will do better in Europe, but at the same time let us recall that this climate was already warmer in the early Middle Ages once, and then the Little Ice Age came. In reality, it goes back to antiquity. Hannibal's times may be a period distant in history for Dewa, whose achievements no one will mention, but not for a historian. Elephants lived in Europe at that time. Hannibal did not take them on his ship, but he took herds from the Phoenician colonies in Spain. It was unrealistic to take elephants on ships of that era. There were also jackals that returned to their lands. There were also lions, which are forgotten. Should we kill those who return to their own country with a decree on invasive species? People generally judge somebody by own lights, especially if they are from lower levels of intelligence. Some time ago I received a message from Germany from a professor who kept emphasizing that he was from Germany and also marked "de" in each message. From registration, as for an imbecile. Shame, because he showed either his contempt for the interlocutor, even worse, or his idiocy. Fortunately for the noble Syberia, such a period is a long time and she will pass away. She will not go down in history. For our planet, the extermination of a species in the early Middle Ages is a short period, like one day. If there is anything to it, it is for example abandoned herds of emus, which do not fit these lands at all, but it is not the emu's fault that Germans love leaky fences when they get bored. Raccoons, which should be chipped if they are a pet. Because we don't know how to take care of a pet and throw them out into the forest. A raccoon is a very smart pet. Smarter than its owner. Fallow deer and pheasants are hard to consider an invasive species. They were imported in ancient times. They were imported by kings. Including mouflons is pathetic, because even the classics of ancient literature mention them. They have been here for quite a long time. Longer than the Saxons. Slave intelligence is emerging. There is such a concept. The climate is changing. The raccoon dog is withdrawing from Europe because it is too warm for it. It is an interesting creature. It did not want to be here. It came to fur farming, and since it was not worth taking care of the condition of the cages of those who will die for a noble cause for man anyway, some managed to escape. More and more animals will move out of here, and those from Africa, which in fact used to be here, will return. To reduce this methane emission, it would be necessary to reduce the population of one species, but no one will say this out loud, because since the end of World War II it has been punishable. No one will do this, so carbon dioxide and methane will continue to be emitted, and Dutch cows have nothing to do with it. They pay for what cannot be done, and they are not to blame. No one quotes old Scandinavian sagas or Roman treaties, because ecological philosophy would have collapsed thanks to Plato. The ozone hole appears in ancient treaties, and old poems indicate that the climate in Europe was warmer. We are emerging from the Little Ice Age. I live with a wolf behind the fence. It doesn't attack my dogs. The neighbor's chickens. The neighbor's dogs, but we don't have holes in the fence and we lock everything at night. We won't disgrace ourselves for a few €100. Bear. A totem associated with Russia. Dear teddy bears. Have you seen a running bear? Then you'd regret. There really is something to it. It's a speeding battering ram. No one would buy a teddy bear if they saw that. Despite this, life of bears is generally badly in the world. We have bear bile farms. A miraculous remedy for everything and nothing. If there is a cure for everything, it's a placebo. Just like cough syrup, wet and dry. You can't reconcile these two. It only works on your head. Alcohol which is in it will numb your head. You can't make syrups without alcohol. We have dancing bears. Unfortunately, we still have. These are kidnapped cubs, which are forced to move to the rhythm of music using hot stones on which they stand. We have bears in the circus. There is a huge problem with them. Because few people know that they are getting old, and then there is problem to what do with them. The more the EU delves into pretending that someone is needed in the extensive institutions, the more stupid laws it creates. It is already reaching the peaks of incompetence, which Kong Si wrote about and warned about centuries ago. The next step, downfall. And so, for example, such bears cannot be retired to zoos, so that they do not infect the animals living there and do not spoil the gene pool. Few zoos break these regulations and accept these animals. They more often end up euthanized. They cannot return to the wild. Let's anticipate the question of some ignorant. They spent too long with people and learned things they should not have. Wojtek was such a dancing bear. A bear soldier of World War II. One of the few decorated animals. A story similar to Winnie. He lived in Edinburgh. He saved Polish soldiers many times. He carried mines, bombs. He caught spies. Unfortunately, they taught him to drink beer and smoke cigarettes. He would go into a restaurant when he smelled beer and help himself. They did him harm, but let's be honest. Those were the years when there was no knowledge about animals and their behavior. In fact, the SS started to deal with it and analyze it on a larger scale. And they analyzed it very well. However, everyone now prefers American analysis, which is often really inconsistent with the nature of animals, also adapted to puritanical claims about the inferiority of animals, just to avoid offending and admitting that the SS might have been right about something, although all modern medicine from in vitro to transplants are SS papers under which now signed by Americans. It is thanks to the sale of knowledge of certain people that no one has seen latter. Bears of Romania. Here I recommend a very good documentary, created by Romanian hunters and foresters, who try to show this film to the largest possible audience and educate about what the problem is. Surprisingly, the hunters said no. We will not kill bears. Which the authorities do not like very much. There is a conflict, but it is the fault of people, as proven by this program, which mainly used camera traps. Many housing estates have entered forest areas inhabited by bears. And what? The housing estates are perfectly secured. There are fences. A great invention that we will see in the film are garbage bins protected by electricity, opened by remote controls. Foresters and hunters showed how this equipment works. It really great innovation. A bear can't rummage through a bin, so there's no point in coming to the estate and suddenly we seeing a bag of garbage placed next to the bin because someone forgot the remote or didn't feel like throwing the garbage into the bin. When we leave garbage bags with food, let's not be surprised that foxes, bears, wild boars, or at best a stray dog, will come. People create feeders and then wonder. The famous road where a bear recently killed a woman is in the place where it had to happen. Most of the film was from this place in the reserve. It shows what people do to take a picture of bears. Throwing away huge pieces of meat is standard. Taking a picture from a car is not enough. It's good to go out and take a picture with a bear, and preferably with a small bear, but what about a mother bear? The mother can be chased away. The mother starts defending her offspring, and this should not surprise any mammal, but the selfie taker does not want her in the picture. No one said it out loud, but it was similar here. A few years ago in Poland there was also a lot of talk about the attack of a small bear. He was not able to do much to those muscled guys on steroids from the gym. The punishment was funny and there was also outrage, because these people were stubborn, that they defended themselves against him and that is why they stoned him. A talent for lies. They stoned him because they wanted to. As they themselves admitted later in interviews. First they gave him sandwiches, and when he went to his backpack they threw stones at him, because it was their stuff. The court is a show. The brutal truth about this institution regardless of the country and system. This has been the case since we inflated the systems of power. There is no truth there, and what counts is which parrot presents its version of events better. Here, this parrot won and the gentlemen were acquitted. They all had the oldest profession written in their appearance, and also stimulants, which stimulated them aggressively even in the courtroom. In both cases, newspapers wrote about human misery, and only 2 periodicals were meticulous and did not omit the most important thing, that someone got out of the car. Someone gave sandwiches. In this case, it is also interesting that neither their companions of too easy virtue nor they were able to put together a correct sentence in their language. Not to mention that even the way these people spoke indicated that they were extremely aggressive towards the world and came from dens. These people did not have any wounds. The bear, on the other hand, was 7 months old. It was the size of a larger dog. The inscription "bear killed itself" is striking, but no one will say why. In Romania, they wanted a photo with a baby. The president is gathering voters. Unfortunately, the electorate, especially in Eastern Europe, is extremely uneducated when it comes to biology. People from these areas have a huge lack of knowledge about the functioning of their bodies, and in several countries this will certainly not change for a long time, because they have chosen a bad path. You can hear that they have Czech or Polish sex. No Pole-Indo-European sex is simply Kama Sutra. You can't get pregnant from anal sex or during menstruation, so let's not be surprised that they don't know that the largest weasel in the world, the bear, is a very intelligent animal. After humans comes the pig, and then the bear. In the current classification of families, sometimes we put dogs and felines on a par with bears. However, we have not yet studied many canids well enough, and these studies mainly concern wild dogs. It depends on schools, and these animals quickly learn what sandwiches are and that it is worth begging for them, instead of looking for berries. The same applies to wild boars. The creators of this program also noted that it is not a documentary just about bears, but it concerns the problem of wild boars, foxes, all wild animals that enter housing estates. These are the consequences of someone's ordinary laziness. Because it is laziness. Throwing a bag next to the bin because I forgot the remote. Lack of culture too. Rudeness, especially in the summer when it is 30 degrees. It says a lot about the person. Also, that they come from a dirty home. Even if they wear perfume, wear designer clothes, it cross out. Not littering around you is the basis. Raccoon. Dog or tanuki. The raccoon dog would not be an invasive species if someone had not brought it from Russia to fur farms and did not really care about the animals or about securing the area, because after all, we will make fur out of it. The raccoon dog is the most interesting representative of the canids, because it hibernates. Raccoon dogs in Europe, that is not Scandinavia, are descendants of farm escapees, although these animals are withdrawing due to climate change. In Japan, in the state religion of Shinto, the raccoon dog is a very important creature, right next to the deer. It brings happiness, harmony. It is worshipped. At restaurants. In homes, there is often a figurine of a raccoon dog. It is also one of the canids about which we know little. To this day, there is a dispute whether a tanuki is a dog. The statue of the tanuki as a mascot, totem or talisman, is supposed to bring happiness. In their fairy tale nature, they are similar to Neko and foxes. Like them, they can change form and take the shapes of objects, plants, other animals, and finally transform into people, often monks. However, tanuki are more friendly towards people, although they show an exaggerated tendency to war and conflict. Their actions are more of a cheerful mischief than punishment, as is the case with foxes. Tanuki has 8 attributes that bring good luck. They are: a bamboo hat, which protects against trouble; large eyes, which help to observe the surroundings carefully and make good decisions; a bottle of sake, which represents virtue, advantage, value; a large tail, which allows to maintain balance, calmness and strength until success is achieved; oversized testicles, symbolizing good luck in finances; a bill of exchange with a promise to pay a specified sum of money, represents trust; a large belly, symbolizing determination; a friendly smile. A rather unusual feature of tanuki is their excessively large testicles. The belief that tanuki have large testicles comes from the work of metalworkers from the Kanazawa area. They would wrap gold in tanuki skin and use hammers to beat it into thin plates. It was said that gold was so malleable and tanuki skin so strong that even the smallest lump of gold could be flattened into an 8-tatami sheet. Because the Japanese word for a lump of gold, kin no tama, is very similar to the colloquial word for testicles, kintama, it is generally accepted that tanuki have a scrotum the size of 8 tatami. In art, tanuki are often depicted in the guise of a monk, sitting and playing what may seem to be a cult drum, but are in fact testicles, ravens. They don't have good associations, and we can blame the 19th century for that, because it wasn't always like that. Unfortunately, Judaism also had a big influence on the perception of the raven, and the closer Christianity got to it, the more harm it did to ravens. However, it was the 19th century that changed our perception of the raven the most. Gods, this scientist should be locked up for abusing animals. It's a miracle that ravens survived after being fed French fries. This book shouldn't be published, because people started to believe that ravens eat French fries with ketchup. It's unhealthy for people, and deadly for animals. Sometimes we see carrion eaters in cities eating French fries, taking them in their beaks. They often make pretty bad nests out of this delicacy. They think they're twigs, not food. However, let's not feed birds French fries ourselves, and especially no groats. Groats are not good for pets either. It swells in the stomach. In the case of birds, this can lead to a ruptured stomach. A sick cow's stomach, the worst nightmare of a veterinarian. Let's go back to ravens. In ancient times and the Middle Ages, they were popular domestic birds, on a par with starlings. Both species are very attached to humans, and both are also intelligent. Today, no one keeps a starling or a raven at home. Especially the latter. Both species also often have nests where they shouldn't have them, and the young fall out of them or fall through the chimney. Most often, they fall through the chimney. There are also bird kidnappings. Someone thinks that a chick is abandoned, but it's not, but this is more likely to apply to already feathered flightless birds. This is all that connects starlings and ravens. While small starlings, like most birds that we may encounter in our garden, once they fall into our chimney and are nestlings, are fed protein. Ravens are fed meat. So if we find a small starling, we can't take it to the vet right away, and it may have been lying there for quite a long time. We boil a hard-boiled egg. Crush it with a blender or a fork. And with tweezers, we give the bird food every few hours. Like any annoying child, it will howl that it is hungry. If someone finds earthworms, thank God for that. At this moment, people often do something that they can kill with, because they push food deep into their beaks. If we look closely, the beak of a small bird is wider on the sides. Shapeless, like that of an adult. With this food, you should touch these folds. This is what parents do, and if we do feed the bird, we gently place the food on the side of this fold. A bird that is not weakened should grab the food with tweezers after touching the fold, because it is a natural reflex for it. This is what parents do. Drinking is also given by wetting the fold, not pouring it down the throat. We do not fatten geese for a French pâté. Ravens, on the other hand, are fed the same way storks and cranes. Chicken leg. Raw. Cut it up. Remove the bones and feed it. The leg has more nutrients. I have fed many birds in my life. It is not something complicated. 2 of them died on me, but they were in very bad condition. One had a collision with a window, a broken cage, a broken wing. A dog found him. He may have spent a few days in the bushes. He did not survive the surgery because of the injuries he sustained. The other one also had to lie down for a long time. He probably injured his neck. A raven, unlike a starling, will not learn to relieve itself in one place. It will fly and shit. That was probably the reason why people gave up on this cooperation. A starling can even be trained to use a litter box in meaning one place. A raven cannot. For unclear reasons, ravens have become a symbol of death. It was not always like this. The Romans and Vikings admired their intelligence. They are very intelligent. They have an excellent sense of smell. They should be respected, because in our ecosystem they play the role of hyenas. They are cleaners, and contrary to appearances, cleaning is important. Although they also hunt. They do not hunt out of laziness. They observe predators that do the dirty work, and when they kill the victim, they fly to them. Usually one appears, then it starts cawing, which notifies other ravens in the area. And they join in. If we see a flock of ravens circling in a place, it means that there is food there, i.e., a corpse. They can chase away a large eagle when there are more of them. They will peck and jump until it leaves them the prey for the sake of peace. They also have no qualms about grumbling to bears or wolves above their heads. In Central Europe, there was once a bear and raven pair. This raven even traveled on the bear's back. They are probably dead now, but such a friendship has been observed, which was established through benefits. Unlike humans, they are monogamous. No, humans have been convinced of monogamy, but they are not a monogamous species and never have been. Sociology has imposed this on society. Ravens do not form flocks. Officially, but it is more complicated, because we see these flocks. This is something that fascinated the Romans and they analyzed it in various ways, translating it into the functioning of society. Some even ventured to say that ravens create an ideal society, because no one sits on anyone's head, but when necessary they can cooperate. Ravens are loners. They pair up for life and interestingly, they raise their young in the winter, because then there is more food. A raven will not look for a partner again, although we will more often meet a pair in the winter. In other seasons of the year they hunt rather separately. However, they do not form flocks. They separate breeding from other spheres. They hunt separately, they spend most of the day separately. The pair meets at specific times mainly for rest and of course breeding. Together they will defend the territory, but they do not sit on each other's head. Despite this, they form flocks when they find food. Then they can cooperate. They inform other individuals about food, they can also take care of their loved ones, which is also an interesting fact, but they do not create societies or maybe it's better society. The famous white ravens do not need to be explained to anyone anywhere. Such a raven can be found in Gdańsk Zoo Oliva. It lives there, but as a free animal. It was hatched by a pair of local black ravens. These are wild birds that decided to live in the zoo. If anyone else has come across a white raven somewhere, share this information. Leucism is very rare among them. Confusing a raven with a rook is a nightmare to this day. A rook lives mainly in cities. It is smaller. It has a light beak. A black raven. A raven is all black. A gray crow is not really a raven. Something between a raven and a rook, they are long-lived. And they reason like mammals, because they can remember and analyze a situation, and use the knowledge they have acquired to solve a problem. Thanks to ravens, we have learned more about birds. Ravens showed the Vikings land. They released them to check if they were close to the coastline. The most famous ravens today are undoubtedly the ravens from the tower. I am not sure if this raven defended this saint from the wolf and his holiness. If he did, it was probably not what he meant. Ordinary biology, dressed up as a good story. In the New Testament, ravens symbolize sincere faith in God's providence, but despite this rather nice fragment, we have drawn so much aversion and false knowledge from our predecessors towards ravens that we do not like them. There is a known case of a raven from the Tower of London Fortress, which lived to be 44 years old in the castle. In various legends and tales, the longevity of ravens is often exaggerated. Some believed that they were supposed to live even 3 times longer than humans, and this is not entirely untrue, because the lifespan of humans has increased significantly. 40 years in the Middle Ages meant an old man. Few lived longer than 50. Young birds can travel in flocks for safety. In mythology, Apollo is a prophet and a fortune-teller. The raven, Saturn's bird, is closely associated with Apollo. It is his favorite bird, servant and messenger. It is also sometimes identified with Apollo. In the Metamorphoses, Ovid repeats the Greco-Egyptian myth of the transformation of gods into animals after Pindar. Apollo then turned into a raven. Strabo believed that in the place of the Delphic oracle, the raven meant the place where the navel of the world is located. Ancient authors noticed and emphasized the duality of the raven, as a Saturnian bird of the night and as an Apollonian bird of the day. Originally, it was supposed to be white, and the black color is the result of a curse. Leucism is in fact a curse. Also a health curse. It was changed to black, or rather cursed, by Apollo, when the raven revealed to him the secret of his lover Coronis, that his lover was pregnant with Apollo's son when she decided to marry a simple boy, Aeschines. Enraged by this information, Apollo changed the raven to black and killed Coronis. After realizing that Coronis was carrying his son in her womb, he probably performed the first caesarean section and extracted the child, who was the future Asclepius. The raven therefore surpassed in secret knowledge and insight the divine Apollo himself, the guardian of the oracle. In Scandinavian mythology, it was often associated with Odin. In iconography, two ravens appear, which personify the memory of Munin and the thought of Hugin, sitting on the shoulders of Odin, the ruler of wisdom, gods and the world. It symbolizes mind and memory. It was supposed to bring Odin news from Earth. Perhaps the most reasonable explanation for this friendship between a raven and a bear was one theory, which said that they probably met in their youth. The life situation of both was difficult enough, or something happened that made them start working together. It was said that the little bear lost its mother and thanks to the raven it found food. It could have associated the raven with food even then. This was the most reasonable of the theories. Tiger. My favorite saying. Do not scorn weak cub, he may have become a brutal tiger. The Russians have a version, a man is recognized by what power, wealth and adversity do to him. Chains are important. The shackles of upbringing cannot be abandoned. They will be visible. At some point, the masks always fall and sometimes it happens that we have a primitive from a very cultured gentleman and vice versa. Ignoring is the bane of humanity. Often after a shooting, we have crowds of hyenas called journalists and they tell us how bad a man he was, happily informing us that the army shot killer down. No one talks about what led to this event, and the world is arranged in such a way that if something happens, there is a cause for it. If they told about it, society would be protected from making the same mistake, but at the same time it would come to light what is in the files, that this environment was not so innocent. And sometimes you want to say they earned what happened to them. Ignoring created Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, but also Hitler and Stalin. The latter two did not have any scruples at all. No, if Temujin said he would protect someone, he did it until the end. That was what the episode was about. This saying refers to him, by the way. Temujin would not have become Kagan if he had not been exiled to the steppe. He returned and there was a war with his blood brother, whom he defeated. It was a very important battle, because from that moment on the Mongols changed their war tactics and this made them an invincible army. The Mongols were afraid of storms and did not fight during storms. They believed that Tengri descends from the sky at that time and that he should not be further irritated. Part of this story is a legend. We do not know whether Temujin actually took refuge in a holy place and the wolf led him out into the storm to get his sword. He certainly had nowhere to hide. When Jamuka asked him after the battle, "How on earth?" Temujin replied, "You really do not know? You banished me to the steppe. I had nowhere to hide, neither from snow, nor from frost, nor from storms, and you know what, I stopped being afraid." From that time on, the Mongols' war tactics changed and made them invincible, because they fought in snowstorms, storms, and rain. The Christian world at that time even played around with something called God's Days, in which no fighting took place, which also prolonged the wars, because on those days people were supposed to sit in trenches, and there were 3 a week. Once it was blown out of proportion. They didn't have that problem. Additionally, they created the seeds of future military bands, although the greatest merit here goes to the Turkish Yenicheri. Mongols hum and sing before battle. In a diabolical voice, as the West called it. They simply made sounds. They had a purpose in this. They tired the horses. Training riding on a tired horse may be impossible these days, unless someone beats the horse, like one lady at the competition and doesn't even get removed from the list of competitors because she has a friend in the European Parliament. What to speak of the battlefield? We are not talking about machines, although many people perceive horses that way, but living beings. Tired living beings are moody. For the Mongols, this was nothing new. The Koreans and the Chinese did the same. All this is in war tracts, but the West did not know it. Tatars used the same methods, that's why we're popular mercenaries. The tiger is the spirit of all of Asia. The Russian part of Asia as well. The Russians have recently remembered this and have begun to respect the tigers they have driven to extinction. The tiger is a spiritual animal here, and indeed if someone wants to understand the Asian they must look at the tiger's behavior. The Mongols, after coming into contact with the Chinese civilization, unlike the Tatars, began to have a spiritual problem whether it was the tiger or the wolf. They put both on the same line. Shamanism in Asia, let's remember, survived. even in the republics. It was the only thing that could not be killed among these peoples, and many were really killed. Just as the Americans destroyed the culture of the Indians, so the Russians irreversibly destroyed the culture of the peoples of the republics. I have a strong suspicion that even in Russia few people know that in Syberia there live peoples who are genetically related to the indigenous people of Native American Saka and have identical beliefs, certain cultural behaviors. They were also locked up in reservations. They did not have it easy. The Mongols were next in line, and then the Tatars. Strong nations, nomadic nations, who were forced to suffocate in blocks, erase their language, because once in history they showed that it can be plundered. The tiger is the guardian of the sky in the culture of China. In Japan it is a white tiger, but the rest of the story is similar. It is a constellation in Chinese cartography and the countries on which it has influenced, i.e. Japan and Korea, but also Mongolia and many peoples of the steppe. It is also a symbol of peace and imperial power, as well as longevity. During the Han Dynasty, people believed that the tiger was the king of all beasts. These are the black tiger, the guardian of winter, associated with the element of water, the blue tiger of spring, associated with the element of earth, the red tiger, the defender of summer, the ruler of the element of fire, and finally the yellow tiger, the most powerful of the above and identified with the sun. White, autumn and west. They are also considered protectors and guardian spirits. Tiger motifs are often found in Chinese art of various kinds. In Korean mythology, tigers occupy a special place. They appear in the myth of the founding of Korea. According to legend, once on Earth only a bear and a tiger lived. The gods told them that they would become human if they took up the challenge of spending 100 days in a dark cave, with only what was necessary to survive. The she-bear successfully completed the challenge and was transformed into a woman, the mother of the future founder of Korea, but the tiger failed the task. However, the gods were merciful to this extraordinary creature and allowed the tiger to remain on Earth as a guardian spirit. The goddess Durga rides a tiger. The indigenous people of Syberia and eastern Russia call the tiger the guardian of the forest. They see the tiger as a protective spirit that keeps the forest healthy and nature in balance. The tiger is a totem for the Amur people. This cat was a symbol of courage and the mythical ancestor of, among others, some Turkic and Tungusic peoples. Its representations are found in ancient tombs. Here, it is Tonga. Both among Siberian tribes that considered the tiger to be a totemic animal, and in some regions of South Asia, killing tigers was strictly forbidden, with a few exceptions, such as self-defense or the need to kill a man-eating tiger. Some people of eastern Syberia had taboos not only related to killing tigers, but also to other activities that affected their lives. It was recommended to give the tiger parts of hunted animals as a gift, in order to appease the spirit of the taiga, so that it would not direct its anger towards people and would not look for food near settlements. It was believed that thanks to such behavior, tigers tolerated humble people on their territory, and sometimes even shared their own prey with them. And they were not wrong. A well-fed tiger had no need to attack the herds. Its belly was full. Can this already be called a process of domestication? This is certainly how the story of the wolf began. Fortunately, cats never fully trusted people. The most famous tiger is Shere Khan. Few people know that he really existed. He is the only historical figure in the Jungle Book. Hindus did not want to kill the sacred man-eating tiger, considering it a divine punishment. He was killed in a British raid. A tiger's anger at a greedy man is a righteous anger. The word amba. Russians from the European part never understood what these people meant in these beliefs. Probably if the Bolsheviks opened a book about China, they would have found out. This tiger here is a bit like Street Hubert's deer. If you take too much, you either convert or die. Some people did not kill the game wounded by the tiger, but left it to it. Shamanism is doing well in the Asian part of Russia. The idolization of the tiger did not prevent the Chinese from killing it and creating remedies, just as in the case of the bear, for nothing. The tiger's testicles will not restore potency if someone is an ass, not a man, or, as a more popular saying goes, the waters of the Volga will not help when a peasant's balls have gone stale and sagged. This belief is pathetic, as the fact that anal cures hemorrhoids can lead to their rupture, and then there is a problem, bigger if this hemorrhoid was a cyst and perforation occurs. There will be no pregnancy from anal. It will happen when the sperm flows out. People forget that sperm is already in the ejaculate. World sexual education is a vast topic. People really reproduce by immaculate conception or enunciation if we start asking society about these matters. Fertile days can also occur during menstruation. If someone likes to soak and drink tampons, that scientific believes are similar to power of bear's bill and tiger's part of bodies. We are not defending it. I remembered an old joke about vampires. Japanese legend says that when a tiger reaches the age of 500, its tail will turn white. In this case, the white tiger will become one of the mythical creatures. It is said that the white tiger appears only when the Emperor of China also reigns in the spiritual world, or when peace reigns throughout the world. Since in Chinese culture, the color white is associated with the West, the white tiger became the guardian of the West. It must be admitted that in Russia, probably mainly due to the fact that the indigenous people and shamanism returned to Syberia, and the white man returned to the European part of country, no one shouts about killing a tiger because it ate a cow. There is no need for environmentalists either. As noted by naturalists dealing with the protection of tigers, and even representatives of local authorities, attacks on farm animals occur where forests are cut down. A well-known case is that in the village of Zolotoy, a tiger broke into a pen and killed a cow. When the owner of the farm caught him red-handed, already eating, the predator attacked him. The man killed him in self-defense. Near, an oak forest was being cut down. Acorns from these oaks were the main source of food for wild boars, and the boars were the most important element of the taiga's diet in this area, and because of the cutting, they disappeared. Hunger pinned the tiger to the wall, especially since it was already a 15-year-old individual with missing teeth. This old man should have been dead for 2 years. Tigers do not live long in the wild. This was understood, and no one wants to restore tiger hunting on such a scale as before. It came to absurdities. Skins from Russia could be bought in India as souvenirs. Surprisingly, the simple farmer turned out to be better educated than the countess from Saxony. Perhaps, however, as a result of incest over the millennia, the nobility has really gone foolish. That is the only thing that connects the countryside with the nobility, lack of access to fresh blood, but that farmer has not gone mad. People there are really still far behind in comparison to places known to tourists. Moscow, St. Petersburg. Unfortunately, poaching is a plague throughout Eastern Europe. Russia as well. The tiger and the panther in the taiga are still endangered. The inhabitants of Russia do not even realize that leopards live there. The authorities even have a dilemma of educating what can create more poaching will or keep them in the unknowledge. Panthers live in Syberia, but today they are a rare sight. Their skins were sold as souvenirs in Africa. This is how the species was actually exterminated. In India, it is a huge problem, but people also behave irresponsibly, and the Indian bureaucracy is legendary for a reason. Houses are being built everywhere. Especially poor people build mud huts in the forests. It is hard to call them houses. Mainly because of the costs, but they provoke tigers with this. Apart from one region where they are God's punishment. When it comes to the fact that the wall on the border may be a threat to the bison population, I agree with Lukashenko. In something. The man told the truth. Surprisingly. He was laughed at, but he told the truth. Veterinarians talk about it among themselves, because it is. Veterinarians talk about it among themselves, because it is not allowed to say it out loud. Maybe, because there will be no migration of individuals, genetic exchange, and let's be honest, work on this species began during the war and it is a genetic mutant, and similarly to Przewalski horses, various things were packed there, least of all the Eurasian bison, because there was nothing to pack the bison with. Genetically, many Przewalski horses turned out to be fjord horses. Well, the breed derived from them. Bison and Eurasian bison are a bigger taboo, and for now, no one really looks there. If we do not provide the mutant with a fresh gene pool, diseases may appear that no one expected within the species or the perpetuation of acquired diseases, e.g. heart defects, arrhythmia. This fence is necessary, but the problem of European bisons will also have to be solved if we want to continue to restore the bison in Europe. Foxes. Foxes are not taken seriously in Europe, but in Asia they are powerful spirits. Demons that possess people. They are the evil equivalent of raccoon dogs, but not entirely evil. In Asia, people know perfectly well that something good can come from evil. A higher good was the episode. The most hated and influential empress, Daji, was called a fox, and it was said that a demon possessed her. Some demons certainly possessed her. Daji was cruel, but she also achieved what she wanted. She is very popular as a fox demon. Since her death, the Daji motif has appeared in Asian literature, plays and films to this day. She must have been beautiful, because foxes turn into beautiful demonic women. Her cult was so strong that it was eventually banned and combated. She certainly did not invent foot binding. An interesting, strange culture of mutilating women for centuries. It was a Manchu custom. Daji has nothing to do with it. But she is indeed blamed for everything, mainly because she was the last empress of the Shang dynasty, and it seems that she interfered in politics or distracted the emperor from it. One does not exclude the other. Her character is so mythologized that we will probably never know what the fall of the last indigenous Chinese dynasty looked like, but Daji herself was probably not the cause. However, we can safely say that Daji was a dominatrix. She came from the common people, but she made up for it. Maybe she was really taught by courtesans. She knew what she wanted, she knew what she was for, and she knew how to achieve it. At the same time, she found her place in men company, because she was able to talk about their topics, which did not prevent her from taking care of herself, but she probably did not cook dinner. A dominatrix strives for power. And men of power who actually have it want a dominatrix. Cleopatra was also a dominatrix. Although she was ugly, she was really able to find her way in male company perfectly and, most importantly, treat men on an equal level and not allow herself to sink below it. These women did not need to change the endings of their professions or use slogans. They were true feminists who knew their role as women, were able to use their feminine qualities and at the same time stand on the same level as men. This is true feminism, not petulance and not really knowing what you want. Foxes brought illness and madness to them, often causing mental retardation. Only mountain ascetics or Miko priestesses from Shinto shrines could expel the demon from a possessed person. Foxes were believed to have a weakness for candles and often steal lanterns from homes. But there are also good fox demons. In feudal Japan, it was widely believed that any woman encountered alone, especially at dusk or at night, could be a kitsune. Kitsune gao, fox face, refers to human women who have narrow faces with closely set eyes, thin eyebrows, and high cheekbones. Yeep, in fact, it's disease, genetic disease. Traditionally, this facial structure is considered attractive, and some stories attribute it to foxes in human form. There are cases where Zenko so good. Foxes have also possessed people, but unlike wild foxes, they did so to help them, for example to develop special skills or cure incurable diseases. It happened that people who had been previously possessed by foxes gained supernatural abilities, such as predicting the future. They also raised several rulers to the throne. Yeep, Daji. Hedgehogs. Apparently there are people who don't love them. I don't know how you can set a hedgehog on fire. What kind of idiot do you have to be to intentionally run over a hedgehog? Let's start with the fact that the hedgehog is a protected species in Europe. Hedgehogs are seen more and more often, but there was a time when hedgehogs really went extinct. Dogs have lost their habit of hedgehogs. Hedgehogs are very useful animals. If there is a hedgehog in our garden, it means that we have a lot of grubs there. The larvae of a certain beetle, which wreak great havoc on flowers and grass. The hedgehog is a very funny creature, and in 2 hours it can really bring relief to our plants. Especially the grass and grubs, contrary to appearances, are difficult to get rid of. The hedgehog is probably the most frequently used animal in fairy tales. In myths related to Livonia and Lithuania. A rabid hedgehog. This is another idea of an idiot. Hedgehogs are the only mammals that do not get rabies even if they are carriers of the virus. Let's remember that you are a carrier after each vaccination as well. Even being a carrier is a fraction of a % in the case of a hedgehog. This foam from the hedgehog's mouth, which people observe. It results from the way the animal eats, as well as the fact that it produces more saliva. After all, it feeds on worms from the ground, and saliva has primarily antibacterial functions. Hedgehogs do not eat fruit, especially apples. Here, all fairy tales should be blamed for misleading. If a hedgehog shows interest in an apple, it wants to eat the worm found there. Hedgehogs can be fed wet dog or cat food. A cat bowl like this will be enough for a hedgehog a few days. Reading this gentleman's articles, I feel like asking what he needs this garden for, if he wants to get rid of everything that lives in it. In such a case, it is best to pour asphalt and put up artificial trees. The Chinese already produce such things. My partner had everything asphalted in front of his house in Tokyo, and only one large tree, but it was alive. However, he worked a lot. If a hedgehog eats fruit on its own, when we find it and want to feed it, it means that it is exhausted and we should take it to the vet. This is not normal behavior, and this abnormal behavior is becoming more and more frequent due to climate change. Hedgehogs are increasingly having one more litter than usually, but the last litter is often caught by winter. These young ones will leave their mother, but they are not very coping. If we meet a small hedgehog in the garden from October, and the mother is not visible, although sometimes she can be hidden, but more often this is the period when the hedgehog should still have time to develop, grow up, and the weather makes it so that it is not there. Let's have mercy and give it this food. A hedgehog hibernates and should go to sleep. It often makes a house out of branches or, worse, finds it and falls asleep uncovered. If we have such a gift in the garden and dogs, we need to move it so as not to wake it up. Unfortunately, if it wakes up, it will not fall asleep. Unfortunately, due to climate change, hedgehogs increasingly have trouble falling asleep. It is warm for a long time. Hedgehogs think they still have time. Either it is very cold, suddenly much warmer, the hedgehog wakes up, and then it snows again. If we see a hedgehog in the garden from November, or worse, in January, it means that something is wrong. Such a hedgehog should be fed. It will return the favor in spring, but depending on the country, you should also notify a vet, a wildlife shelter, or a hedgehog shelter. Hedgehogs are considered the most common victim of climate change. Many people do not realize this. Such a hedgehog must go to a place where it will spend the winter without sleeping. You can try to feed the hedgehog every day and build it a shelter. I have succeeded a few times, but not everyone has time for it. In the period from September to the end of October, hedgehogs will eat a lot and visit gardens. Hedgehogs are very brave. They also hunt snakes, often larger than them. They are good parents. If we find a little one somewhere, the mother is certainly nearby. There is even a legend about why dogs do not like hedgehogs. Indeed, regardless of the type, hunting dogs, herding dogs, mongrels, molossers, all have a problem with hedgehogs. The second is due to climate change. In the past, hedgehogs didn't have this problem. Now, you can find fungus-covered monsters in clinics. A hedgehog like that needs help, especially since it often ends with a single medication. Bucephalus, a horse that was afraid of shadows. Sikander rode him so that he couldn't see him. He founded a city on his grave. This is the only Alexandria that exists to this day unchanged. Sikander's Alexandria in Egypt is rather underwater. The horse played a huge role in shaping civilization. Horse slaughterhouses should already be forgotten. If someone likes horse meat, it means they have a primitive palate, as every butcher and vet will tell you. This meat is of poor value, this meat falls apart, poor production material. It was a dish of the worst type of poor. In Islam, as in Celtic beliefs, an outstanding person, a noble warrior, a good ruler, a nobleman is reborn in a horse. Among the Celts, there is the goddess Morrigan, the goddess Epona. The Vikings have Sleipnir, a horse with 8 legs. It is not entirely impossible for such a horse to be born. If chimerism occurs, it is likely. Valkyries. Epona is the Earth Mother. Native Americans call a horse a word that can be translated as big dog. There's something to it. A horse can behave like a big dog. In Japan, there's this problem that racing has become popular. Suddenly, everyone knows about horses. Rather, their exploitation, but no one knows about their care. It's not a hardy animal. It quickly gets pneumonia, for example. Few people there know what laminitis is. I even heard a few days ago that it's a hoof disease, oh my. This education is starting there, but it will be a slow process. Unfortunately, many breeders forget about this. Horses are very emotional. If a stillborn fetus occurs, the mother horse, like a moose fawn, must see the fetus and must be allowed to stand next to it for a while. From a biological point of view, she must detect the smell of a corpse. If this does not happen, at best there will be behavioral problems. Veterinarians know, breeders forget. For them, it is money. A horse can be broken in from the age of 3. The spine must heal. If someone does it earlier, it is deforming it. Eastern Europe and the horse trade. There is indeed such a regulation, for example in Poland, that if an animal is permanently damaged, tax is not paid on sale for slaughter. It has been changed a little, but there have been situations where owners have gouged out eyes or even pulled horses under trucks so that they run over their legs, so as not to pay tax. Today, animal protection laws are starting to appear in Eastern European countries, but these are minor penalties. Judges often think like a perpetrator, so they often acquit. They often cite the low harmfulness of the act, so cases are even dismissed. Sanssouci is a temple of dogs and horses. Frederick the Great always wanted to be buried with dogs and a horse. He believed, and rightly so, that being in power, his only true friends were dogs, because they wanted nothing from him. Some circles now make every loner out to be gay. There is no evidence for this, and the relationship with Anne Orzelski and how he changed after the breakup contradicts this. Similarly to the case of Eugene de Savoy. More facts prove that they were asexual. Really, not everyone dreams and thinks only about sex. There are also plenty of aces in the world. They are the happiest people in the world. They cannot be manipulated. The temple of the deer is undoubtedly Stupaniji. This is a temple of animals. A temple of hunting. A temple of dogs. The only portraits we find in the famous Great Hall are portraits of dogs and a mischievous fox, which also belonged to Charles Emmanuel. This is in concept and even by name a small hunting lodge. A few hundred rooms is a detail. This is the Savoy's Versailles. Better because it had toilets. In both cases, we are talking about similar personalities and unnecessary, unloved children. In both cases, the parents did not hide the fact that the child irritated them. Both gentlemen made better friends with animals. Frederick treated wounded animals on the battlefield, but soldiers literally shit at the clap. This parental hatred created a dislike for people. However, we do not study both gentlemen. We talk about totems. In Orthodoxy, it is Saint Eustace, and in Western culture, Saint Hubert. We have the grave of the latter in Liege and both legends somewhere. At some point, identical ones had to meet for this to happen. A white deer cannot be killed, it brings bad luck. Everyone on the continent knows this legend. It is worse overseas. A non-believer also believes that he does not believe, and the fact that we do not see something is not proof that it does not exist. There is a theory that the shadow is the soul. Where does this bad luck come from? Is little like white bison for Native American. One is Serbia Zoo. Who knows, maybe will be reborn of native soul. Hubert's wife died giving birth to their son Floribert, and his grief prompted him to retreat from the court. He withdrew into the forests of the Ardennes and gave himself up entirely to hunting. Legend holds that on a Good Friday morning, while the faithful were in church, Hubert was hunting in the forest. As he pursued a magnificent stag or hart, the animal turned and Hubert was astounded to see a crucifix floating between its antlers. He heard a voice saying, "Hubert, unless thou turnest to the Lord and leadest a holy life, thou shalt quickly go down into hell." Hubert dismounted and prostrated himself, and after asking, "Lord, what wouldst thou have me do?" is told, "Go and seek Lambert, and he will instruct you." The story of the stag first appears in one of the later legendary hagiographies and has been appropriated from the legend of Saint Eustace aka Placidus. Placidus was Eustace's name before he was baptized. The stag story was only attributed to Saint Hubert in the 15th century. On the beginning it was typical stag. Not white. Probably thanks art. Cranes, their presence truly heralded the end and beginning of the year. Today, some remain, and when the snow comes, The legs will prove themselves. Their sound moves. There is no country in Asia that does not worship them in some way. In China, Japan, many poems about cranes were created. Pictures. Cranes are primarily, similarly to mandarin ducks, a symbol of fidelity. They are not given to the newlyweds, but cranes unite for life. They are monogamous like ravens. It is also longevity and happiness. It is worth noting that he is called the Venerable Lord. It was predictable that the Saxon woman would win and take revenge for the pony. In certain behaviors, she has a spectrum. Besides, sociopaths go into politics. This is the truth. Myths and legends help her in this. It is man who is dangerous. None of them. It is a beast walking on the ground. He was right not to bow to man. He knew his worth. He knows it. And every day he takes off the masks. On the beginning of the world, when people lived in paradise, animals communicated with them by human speech. However, when they sinned and had to go, God forbade the animals to use human speech under threat of going to hell. The animals promised God they would not talk to humans anymore. If none of them ever breaks their promise, they will go to heaven immediately after their death, because neither of them has betrayed God, and man will have to earn this honor from now on. However, God, seeing that the first people could not cope, turned to the dog. I will send you to earth, you will make sure that they try to follow the right path, and you will teach them to love again. The dog did as he was told. When Eve saw the dog in front of the shelter, she was very happy. Adam couldn't believe it. It was a substitute for the good old lost years, but someone was watching them. It was a swashbuckling cat. He thought, I'll put them to the test, see if they've learned anything. Will they continue to be good, or will they betray again? Years passed. The dog helped Adam in hunting, and Eve with guarding the children and at home. One day, while the dog was resting on the porch, the cat decided to act. Of course, the first people were very happy to see the second acquaintance and allowed him to stay. The dog and cat would spend time together from then on. One day they were both on the porch. The dog fell asleep, and the cat at that time killed the bird and put it under the door. When Eve went out to the garden and saw what had happened, she called Adam. Adam asked which of them did this. However, neither the dog nor the cat could answer, they just wagged their tails. The dog had his tail high and barked at the cat's tail was low. He began meowing and rubbing against humans' legs, which Adam misunderstood. Adam didn't recognize speech of cat's tail, which began to twist. The way the cat's tail is waggled should have given Adam for thought. The situation repeated several times, and finally one day Adam beat the dog so much that he killed him. The dog didn't speak, so he couldn't defend himself. The dog went to heaven, and when he stood before God, our Lord smiled and the dog pleaded with him, Lord, let me go to them and explain what happened. Let me use human speech for the last time. God agreed, but had one more message from himself. On the earth at that time, the birds continued to disappear and were brought to the door, and the people realized that they had not passed another test again and the dog was innocent. One day the dog appeared to Adam. The first man began to apologize to him, explaining that he already knew what had happened, that he did not want to, but it happened. The dog interrupted the convoluted speech and spoke. Man, don't apologize. While you were still in paradise, you should learn this. After all, God himself introduced you to all animals. I was always with you when there was nothing to eat for weeks and when we ate like kings. When it was warm and when it was cold, then I warmed you with my body. I guarded your property against thieves. I took care of your offspring. Cat and I answered your question all the time. I had my tail up and I was barking at the cat, and he had his tail low and he was rubbing against you, apologizing. Then his tail twisted like a snake on an apple tree. I don't blame the cat, that's his nature. A loving cat brings his prey to his family to share. It is an honorable gift from him. I only blame you, though the cat was not fair to me. I loved you as God commanded, for nothing, something that you and your offspring will never understand and will never know. I am also to give you one last message from God. He let me to tell you that only Cain's descendants would survive. Someday you'll understand that. It was the last human-dog conversation. Yes, only Cain's descendants survived. I didn't blame the cat anymore either. It was removed. It did not fit. And so man became a higher being, and the order became governing. It was necessary to grant, for example, divinity to emperors. To attribute to themselves the power of the chosen ones. An important fragment of Jewish scriptures, removed, and it changed the fate of animals in all religions that came after. We are the nation of the wolf. We can be someone's arm, but not a servant. Tintoretto's creation of the world is more adequate and more beautiful. In Japan, deer have their own temples. This is the most important deity of Shinto. The last animalistic religion in existence. The last religion and country where ruler is still the ruler. Abel had no children. Just Cain. And that's all in this subject. The greatest forgotten answer.